Direct News TV. September 29, 2023. Russia-Ukraine War Live, Ex Prigozhin aide to oversee volunteer fighters. Russian President Vladimir Putin has tasked a former aide of late Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin, Andrei Trashev, to oversee volunteer fighter units in Ukraine. Russia has said it destroyed 11 Ukrainian drones overnight, though one UAV dropped explosives on a substation, cutting a local power supply. A new Russian conscription campaign, due to start on October 1, will include the occupied regions of Ukraine. On an unannounced visit to Kiev, NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg said Ukrainian forces were gradually gaining ground in their counteroffensive. Putin pays tribute to Russian prisoners killed in Ukraine. President Putin has hailed Russian prisoners who died fighting in Ukraine, saying they had fully redeemed themselves. Everyone can make some mistakes, they once did. But they gave their lives for the motherland, and fully redeemed themselves, Putin said at the meeting with servicemen who fought near Ukraine's Uruzhane on the southern front. To boost regular troops fighting in Ukraine, the army and mercenary group Wagner have extensively recruited from Russian penal colonies. Russian athletes to compete as neutrals at 2024 Paralympics. Athletes from Russia will be able to compete as neutrals at next year's Paris Paralympics Games. The ruling means the athletes will compete without a national team or emblems, flags and anthems. Earlier on Friday the IPC voted against fully suspending the National Paralympic Committee Russia by a vote of 74 to 65, 13 abstentions, and then voted 90 to 56 in favor of a motion to partially suspend Russia for 2 years, subject to reassessment at a next General Assembly. As a result of the General Assembly's decision, National Paralympic Committee, Russia's membership rights are suspended for 2 years, the IPC said in a statement. With the exception that its athletes, and related support personnel, will be eligible to participate in an individual and neutral capacity in the Paralympic Games and World and Regional Championships and sanctioned competitions in the 6 sports for which the IPC acts as international federation. The IPC also voted not to suspend Belarus, which has been a staging ground for Russian troops and weapons during the invasion. Switzerland tightens sanctions over Iranian drone deliveries to Russia. Switzerland adopted further sanctions in connection with Iran's drone deliveries to Russia, in line with European Union measures, the government has said in a statement. The sale, supply, export and transit of components used for the manufacture and production of drones is now prohibited, and targeted financial and travel sanctions against persons and entities connected with support for Iran's drone program are in place, added Switzerland's Federal Council. Norway bans entry of Russian-registered cars. Norway has announced Russian-registered passenger cars will no longer be allowed to enter its territory starting next week. Norway, which is a member of NATO but not of the EU, has a 198-kilometer-long, 123-mile-long, border in the Arctic with Russia. The Scandinavian country stands together with allies and like-minded people in the reactions against the brutal war of aggression by Russia against Ukraine, Foreign Minister Anniken Huitfeldt said in a statement. The ban means that Russian-registered passenger cars with 9 or fewer seats can no longer be brought into Norway. Buses and minivans with 10 or more seats will still be able to cross the border at Storskog, the sole crossing point between Norway and Russia. The government in Oslo said there will be exceptions for diplomatic vehicles, for cars owned by Norwegian citizens and their family members with permanent residence in Russia, and for travel necessary for humanitarian reasons, such as acute illness, death or family funerals. Italy's Intesa Bank gets Putin's approval to sell Russian assets. Italian bank Intesa Sanpaolo has secured approval from Russian President Putin to sell or dispose of its assets in the country, according to a document posted on a Russian government website. The decree said Moscow was permitting transactions that would lead to the direct or indirect disposal of 100% of Intesa's shares. Earlier this year, supervisors from the European Central Bank stepped up pressure on lenders to cut their exposure to Russia amid the war in Ukraine. Russia to double costs of servicing state debt by 2026. Russia's annual budget spending on servicing its state debt will more than double to 3.32 trillion rubles, $34 billion, between now and 2026 as Moscow ramps up military spending to fund the war in Ukraine, draft budget documents showed. Moscow has been diverting more and more funds to its military as it prosecutes what it calls a special military operation in Ukraine and is counting on a recovery in oil and gas revenues to pre-invasion levels and a sharp increase in state debt to do so. Switzerland approves aid package to demine Ukraine. Switzerland's Federal Council has approved a 100 million Swiss franc, $110 million, package to demine parts of Ukraine, the government said on Friday. A total of 100 million Swiss francs will be earmarked for humanitarian demining between 2024 and 2027, funded in equal parts by the Department of Defense, Civil Protection, and Sport, DDPS, and the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs, FDFA, the government said. 7 countries order ammunition under EU scheme to arm Ukraine. 7 EU countries have ordered ammunition under a landmark European Union procurement scheme to get urgently needed artillery shells to Ukraine and replenish depleted Western stocks, according to the European Defence Agency, EDA. The orders, placed under contracts negotiated by the EDA, are for 155 mm artillery rounds, one of the most important munitions currently used in the war. 7 member states have already placed orders for 155 mm ammunition through the EDA's fast-track procedure, the agency said in an email in response to questions from the news agency Reuters, without disclosing the names of the countries or the value of the contract. Powerful explosion in Berdyansk, Kiev Independent. The Kiev Independent claims that the city of Berdyansk, which is occupied by Russian forces, has been rocked by a powerful explosion. The explosion was reportedly followed by power supply interruptions in the city, according to the news outlet, which cited the city military administration. Moscow concerned that external actors are meddling in Afghanistan, TASS. Moscow is concerned about the attempts of extra-regional players to become more active in the Afghan direction, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said in a written address to the Moscow format consultations on Afghanistan being held in Kazan, Russian news agency TASS has reported. Lavrov added that the countries in the region will only fully cooperate with the member states of the NATO bloc when they fully acknowledge their full responsibility for the baleful results of their 20-year military presence in Afghanistan, which ended in a complete fiasco. Will ex-Wagner troops rejoin Russia's fight in Ukraine? Pavel Felgenhauer, a military analyst, says Russia needs the former Wagner soldiers in its battle with Ukraine forces, but questions about their deployment remain under ex-commander Andrei Trashev's direction. The problem is most of them don't want to work directly with the Ministry of Defense, and that means they're trying to put together something like Wagner but not in its name, he told Al Jazeera. He noted some fighters have already signed up with the Defense Ministry, but others are reluctant to after Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin and other senior leaders died in a mysterious plane crash in August. Trashev doesn't have much of a following compared to those killed in the crash, Felgenhauer said. Russian athletes can compete at Paris Paralympics after IPC votes against full ban. Russian athletes will be able to compete as full participants or neutral athletes at next year's Paris Paralympics after the International Paralympic Committee members voted against a full ban of Russia on Friday. At the IPC General Assembly in Bahrain, IPC members voted 74 to 65, 13 abstentions, against a motion to fully suspend NPC, National Paralympic Committee, Russia for breaches of its constitutional membership obligations, the IPC said. The UK will never recognise Russia's claims to Ukrainian territory, cleverly. The UK will never recognise Russia's claims to Ukrainian territory. Crimea, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, Luhansk and Kherson are Ukraine, Britain's Foreign Minister James Cleverly said in a statement on Friday. Vladimir Putin declared the regions to be new Russian territory a year ago following referendums not acknowledged under international law. Russia then held widely condemned regional and municipal elections in the 4 annexed regions earlier this month. The British government also imposed an asset freeze and travel bans on officials linked to the elections on Friday. Zelensky visits Babi Yar massacre site. Zelensky visited the Babi Yar massacre site to mark the 82nd anniversary of one of the largest mass murders of Jews in the Holocaust. The Ukrainian president placed a candle at the historic site and said Ukraine would never forget the tragedy perpetrated by Nazi Germany. On September 29 to 30, 1941, around 34,000 adults and children, most of them Jews, were killed at the Babi Yar ravine outside Nazi-occupied Kiev. Babi Yar, also called Babin Yar, was the scene of mass executions until 1943. Up to 100,000 people were killed there, including Jews, Roma and Soviet prisoners of war. My name is Kingsley. Please like, share, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can be the first to be notified whenever we post. You won't regret it.